I think my advice probably isn't much different to the advice I have for creating a successful podcast. I think it's stand for something, right? Like have a point of view. I think believe in what you think and communicate that clearly to the world. And I think that the people that believe what you believe will come to you because they know where to find it. So there's many podcast companies out there that produce their own shows and they do sort of branded on the side, because they can do these sort of brand funded content that helps fund some of their other shows that allow them to create these kind of true crime shows or whatever they might be producing. But we opted to just sort of really just firmly put 2 feet into, no, we are really proud to be branded podcast only. This is all we do. And we serve the enterprise market and we're really proud of this work. And I think that clarity in what we do and who we serve has really aided us a lot. So I think really just decide the market that you want to serve, how you want to serve it, and what your point of view is around that, and try to really communicate it. And also the other piece of advice is just stick with it. Like our growth journey has, sped up considerably during the pandemic, but it was pretty slow until then. And so I put a lot of our success down to just keeping at it for a long period of time. I think we can't expect big wins to just appear overnight, and it's very easy to look online, to look on social media and see all the success stories. We're not seeing all of the failure stories or the mediocre stories. We're seeing the outliers. And so I think we can kind of get a bit of a skewed vision of what success looks like. And so I would, stick true to what you believe in, stick at it. And if you can keep doing it for long enough, like, you will build up that reputation, and that will come back to pay dividends in time.
Welcome to another episode of That Podcast Exchange. This is podcast is an insightful conversation with people at the top of their game and deconstruct them to find the tools, tactics, and tricks to help you achieve your dream goal to be a podcast producer or podcast manager. My guest today is Harry Morton. He is the founder and CEO of Lower Street, an award-winning global podcast agency for brands. From Fortune 500 companies to early stage startups, they help ambitious businesses to launch and grow category leading show. Harry has over 15 years of experience in audio and has been obsessed with podcasts since I first discovered them in 2006. Harry lives in Somerset in the UK with his wife, 2 kids, and a cow called Eliza. Welcome to the show, Harry.
Thanks very much. I'm sorry my cow couldn't make it.
Thank you so much for your time. Can you tell us a bit about your journey and what led you to start your podcast agency?
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't know when I started out that it was going to be a podcast agency. I knew for a long time that I wanted to do my own thing. Growing up, I was always pretty entrepreneurial. I was the kid that was like cutting pages out of skateboard magazines and selling them as posters to my friends so I could, buy snacks and things, and mowing people's lawns and washing cars and stuff. So I was always like quite entrepreneurial. But my background, I grew up in a musical household, and I went to university to study audio and did post production. And my first job out of university was in a post production studio in London, doing sound for TV ads, and deeply stressful. And actually, one day I ended up. I'm sure other fellow audio people have memories of losing critical audio files. I was responsible for losing a whole voice recording session that one of our clients had spent lots of money on for an advert for a bleach product. And that led to me getting fired. So I lost my job, what I thought was my dream job at the time in audio post-production, and wasn't really sure what to do. And it was in that time that I ended up getting into sales and marketing roles, and I traveled the world a bit. I went to Australia, where you are, for a few years. And during that whole period working in sales, I was really thinking, okay, I don't want to go back to working in a studio. I want to start my own business. What should it be? And the way I was educating myself on how and what to start for my business was through podcasting. I was listening to shows all the time, learn from people exactly like this podcast is, I guess, to learn from other people that are doing the sorts of things I wanted to do. And slowly sort of things started to click into place. Okay, I've got audio experience. I love podcasting. Maybe there's something for me to do here. And so in 2016, I did that. I started by myself. I always joke it was kind of me in my underpants in my bedroom, saying we and like talking about the work that I did as if it was like a big company, kind of fake it till you make it. And it was very much just me for many years. And then slowly sort of built up that book of business over time and started to bring in help from other people, to the point that we've now grown to 25 people across the world. And I'm glad to say that I employ people that are far more talented at audio and storytelling than I ever was. So, we're surrounded by really cool people doing work that we're really proud of. So it's been a long and sort of slow and steady progression, I would say, over many years.
Thank you so much for that. There's a lot of podcast agency nowadays. What set your agency apart from other podcast agency in the market?
Yeah, well, this is something I thought about a lot, particularly in kind of 2018, 19 time. A lot of agencies jumping into the space because on the face of it, there's not much of a barrier to entry into being a podcast agency, right? Like we can all download Audacity and say, yeah, I can edit your audio file and I can be your podcast producer. So I was really struggling with that. I was like, how do I stand out from all of these other people? And so I thought a lot about what makes us special. And I think the decision that I took and what worked for me was to continue to focus on going up market. So you mentioned in the introduction, very kind of you, that we work with Fortune 500 companies, for example. And so that was really what became my goal. I wanted to move away from working with, authors and speakers and that sort of traditional kind of podcast interview style show creator, and move more towards how do I work with the big organizations. And so I went on it took me a period of sort of 3 or 4 years probably to slowly build up that base of enterprise level clients. And that's really what has led to a great deal of success we experienced during the pandemic when everyone went online and suddenly they were looking for ways to produce content remotely. And we had this sort of, portfolio of clients that we're working with on the enterprise side, and that worked for us really well. So to answer the question in a long way, what sets us apart, I suppose, is our focus on being kind of premium, on being enterprise serving, and really kind of trying to focus instead of on always doing straightforward interview shows. Like, what are the other creative formats that we can create with clients around narrative storytelling and sort of trying to really create the sorts of shows that you're used to hearing on NPR or This American Life or whatever your favorite Radio Lab, whatever your favorite kind of show is. That's the sort of storytelling we're trying to encourage these corporate clients to embrace.
Thank you so much for that. Since most of the listener and audience right now is a podcast manager or aspiring to be like you as a podcast agency, can you walk me through your process for understanding a brand identity, the target audience, and marketing goals? How will you ensure the podcast is aligned with this aspect?
Yeah, this is like the topic that I talk about all the time. I'm writing a book about it right now, as it happens. So I think that, like, I guess the way to not do it. Why don't I start with that? Because I think that quite often this is what brands and podcasters tend to do. They come up with this idea. I've got this amazing idea. I want to interview these people on this topic in this way, and I'm going to make this show and put it out into the world and try and find some listeners. And that can work, right? And I think there's an important element to hold on to of that sort of creative drive, that creative juices that you want to sort of satisfy by creating something like a podcast. However, it's really challenging for that, or your odds of success are much, much less than if you instead of thinking about think internally, like, what do I want to create? And now let me put that out into the world. You instead think about, who do I want to serve? Who is that audience? What are they already consuming? What are they looking for? What's missing in their kind of podcast diet right now? And how do I create that? What do I have to offer that can fulfill that need? And if we start from that listener obsession, rather than our own sort of idea generation, then we're kind of in a much better position to create something that there is a listenership for and that will find success. And so that feeds not only into, what is the format for the show? What's the concept for the show? But it's also around, how do we promote it after the fact? So if we understand our audience, we know where they're hanging out, we know what they listen to already, we know what they care about, we know what the topics are that they're going to hook them in. And so then we can think about that as we create the show. We can think about the promotion of it as part of that sort of production process. So it's not just a case of like, I've made this podcast, now how the heck do I get it out there? Okay, I'm going to tweet about it, I'm going to post about it on LinkedIn and hope that people get excited by that. If we've written the episode with that promotion in mind, we know exactly what that story is going to be and how that's going to kind of, attract attention and get people to come over and listen. So I think the moral of the story really is like, how do we obsess over the listener that we're trying to serve and be very, very specific of who that is? So everyone talks about sort of the power of niches. But I think there's also this tendency to go, but I don't want to rule out this audience or this audience. I want to make sure that it's interesting to all of these groups. I think the power is really in saying, okay, this is our number one bullseye target listener. We could compare. You could say, okay, my podcast is for this group, but also this group, and let's create a Venn diagram and figure out what's interesting to both of these groups. That could work. But instead, if we said, okay, this is the main group that we really, really care about, let's make the show exactly for this person. There's then sort of like a set of circles of people that are slightly outside of that group, but that are going to be interested in your content because it's somewhat related to what they do. But it stands for something. It's differentiated. You have a point of view because you're not trying to serve everybody. You're trying to serve a really specific need. And having that specificity and having that kind of directness in the content that you're creating inevitably makes it more interesting than if you're trying to attract a bunch of different people.